All right, everyone, welcome to the Literacy Weekly webinar. I don't know what number we're on, but we're glad to have you here. Most of us have already kind of renamed ourselves, but if you haven't done that, please do that using the three dots in the upper right-hand corner. If you're having trouble renaming yourself, you can just type that in the chat and one of the coaches can help to rename you. Today we're going to talk about differentiation. This was our big winner of our survey last time. Thinking about how do we differentiate for our kids while we are kind of apart. And so we're going to share a couple of ideas for you to start off. And then we're going to have some time to think about those kind of tier 2 and tier 3 students and do a little bit of time to dig in on some specific plans. So I think, Sarah, you are going to start us off today. Is that correct? All right, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. So just to kind of start off when we talk about differentiation, I just want to encourage you to get creative. So we've been doing this for a couple of weeks now, and so a lot of us are getting our bearings as far as electronic things go and teaching live lessons and pre-videoed lessons, sending things out in a variety of platforms. So when we're starting to talk about differentiation, it's really helpful to think about this in a creative way. So I thought I would just share out a bunch of different ideas with you as far as ways that you can get your kids in small groups and meet them where they're at, just like you would in a classroom. So maybe some of these will not work with how you are setting up your days right now in e-learning, but it might kind of get you an idea of something and how you can possibly kind of adapt one of these ideas and make it work for you and your class. So these are just some ideas that some teachers have found to be successful. And so in order for us to be pulling those small groups, it seems like a really daunting task, but I encourage you to get creative in this way. So some different ideas are, if you are doing some sort of live Zoom meeting or Google Hangouts or whatever your platform is for a live call with your class, it can often be helpful to just tag on an additional time for your students for a small group. So you're doing your whole Zoom meeting, maybe you're teaching a math lesson, or you're doing your morning meeting, or you're doing a read aloud. And when you normally would say, all right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, see you later, you would actually sign most of your kids off, and you would keep a couple of your students on the call with you, and then you could continue doing a small group with them. So if you divide your students into 5 groups, and you have 5 days worth of live Zoom meetings, then on Monday, group 1 would meet with you right afterwards, on Tuesday, group 2, and so on. So that's just a way to kind of help with this scheduling. If students are already showing up for a live Zoom meeting with your whole class, you could do a small group with them and hit that group at least once a week. Another way that I found this to be helpful is doing some sort of live office hours. So if you're saying, hey, everybody, I'm going to be on this Zoom link or this Google Hangouts, here's the link between 9 and 11 a.m. And you can hop on and off whenever you want to if you need help. And so I was just talking with a teacher last week about how helpful this has been, and she started it on Monday, and by Friday, she had students who were just sitting on the call with her on mute and just doing their work. And so they just unmute themselves, ask her a question about something, and then go on about their day and continue working. And then she was also, grading work, getting, lessons and things ready for the next couple days. So she was also getting her work done, but it was just an easy way for students to kind of get to stay connected and to be there if there is a question. Something else that could be helpful potentially is using the Zoom waiting room function. So if you are asking students to come on either in small groups, you can ask, like, let's say you have a group of students that you want to meet with for 20 minutes. You can send the whole Zoom, you can send the Zoom link out to your whole class and tell, group 1, you're meeting at 9 o'clock with me. So show up at 9 o'clock. They show up, you do your small group meeting with them in Zoom. You say, okay, it's 9:20, see you later. They disappear, they leave the Zoom meeting. and your group 2 is now sitting there in that virtual waiting room of Zoom, and you can just bring them on. So this is a really helpful way of doing it for you as the teacher who's like, I can't coordinate a million Zoom calls right now and setting everything up and making sure that it's sent to the right people. It's an easy way for you to just say, I'm creating one Zoom link for this full hour, and now I want you to, hop on when it's your turn, and I will pull you in from the waiting room. Some other different ideas for differentiation is asking parents or your own students, I guess, if your students are older, to sign up. So saying, sending out a Google Doc and asking parents or students to say, hey, on Mondays or Wednesdays between this hour and this hour, when can you come and sign up and meet with me? And then you can kind of send out those small group Zoom links or Google Hangouts, whatever you're doing, and getting those kids to group on to just do check-ins with them and see how they're doing, or making sure that you can even do some small assessments. So yeah, and then typically if they're signing up for that time, because we don't have a ton going on during this time, you can continually use that same block of time each week for the rest of the school year, and that minimizes all the organization that needs to happen. Another thing that can happen is, I know Title I teachers are available and can be possibly used for this time. So if you have a live Zoom link, a live Zoom meeting, you can use your Title I resource teachers and your aides and any specials teachers, and you can do your whole group lesson and then do breakout rooms. So if you're the host of a Zoom lesson, at the very bottom of your Zoom screen, it'll say assign breakout rooms, and you can send, your Title I teacher with these 4 kids over to a breakout room, just like we do today in our webinar. And they can do a small group thing that way too. So that's a way for you to kind of utilize all of the resources that you have, but you have to be a little creative in doing it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And if you are unsure how to use the waiting room feature or how to use the Zoom breakout room feature, we can talk about that when we go to breakout rooms as well. Because I know it has been a learning curve for all of us. And there's still sometimes where I think I have the waiting room off and it's on, or vice versa. And then you kind of get flustered. So just remember, it's okay if we're still figuring those things out. So when we're thinking about differentiation, one of the ways that we would do this in the classroom is we would make sure that our kids were matched to appropriate text, right? And that's a lot easier when we have our beautiful bins that we've spent so much time on, labeling and ensuring that they're kind of all together. Not so easy when we are having kids kind of figure out text online. And so this is a shout out to Sarah, actually, who found all of these wonderful resources, and I just get to reap the benefits of telling you about them. There are a ton of teachers out there who have started to create kind of virtual classroom libraries on Padlet or on Google Docs using Epic or using other free resources, and they've kind of done them by interest shelf and by level. So we have a couple of resources for you here, but we would suggest that you check these out, because if you know that you have kids who are kind of reading kind of all over the place, you can assign them to a certain shelf, or this can help to kind of like rotate and revise your inventory, as this link says here, right? Sometimes kids get stuck in a certain Epic trap or in a certain Raz Kids trap, and they're reading the same kind of books over and over. This can help to say, check out, these books about animals, levels A through C. So thinking about, again, matching kids to appropriate leveled text, we were kind of thinking about what are some of the ways that we would differentiate if we're in person. And one way would be guided reading, right? Probably all of us have some type of guided reading or strategy group where we bring kids to our table and we do some work around that. And so we thought about what could this look like in this world of working on computers. So thinking about assigning particular books, either from your virtual classroom library, from Raz Kids, from Epic, to a certain small group, and then bringing them together on Zoom using some of those strategies that Sarah mentioned in previous slides to just have a conversation about the book. It doesn't have to be a whole guided reading lesson plan, but just thinking about that experience of shared text that kids are getting that we know are at a level that's appropriate for them. Epic does have some quizzes, so if you wanted to look at some of the questions that were on there, that can be a great place to just think about where the conversation can go. And then Raz Kids in Reading A to Z have a lot of guided reading lessons. I wouldn't suggest doing a whole lesson, but maybe picking a piece or two that corresponds to the book that you might want to talk about in that Zoom meeting. So almost thinking like a pseudo guided reading group that we can do virtually. Again, just trying to think about matching kids to appropriate text. Now that they've been reading and kind of getting to choose, thinking about giving them kind of forced choice around what we want them to be reading. And then Sarah mentioned this, but I think it begs repeating. Everyone can help with differentiation. So think about who are people in your building that can hop on a call with you and help you with those small groups, right? One of our pre-K teachers at Our Lady of Tepeyac was saying that her instructional assistant does a lot of her small groups in Spanish. And so she kind of gives her the materials, and her instructional assistant runs the lesson in Spanish while she runs it in English. And this helps because we know that our pre-K kids are getting a lot of help from their parents, right? They need their parents to engage. And so parents who don't speak English can kind of engage in the lessons there. Think about your teachers up and down, right? If you're a first grade teacher, what is your kindergarten teacher doing? Can you kind of direct your kids who need a little bit more help to some of those kindergarten lessons? Think about what the second grade teacher's doing. Your kids that are flying high, can you direct them to those second grade lessons, right? Maybe even like we send kids up or down for guided reading, can they join that group of kids for a Zoom lesson or a Zoom call? So thinking about how can we use each other to differentiate. One of the positives about the space that we're in is that, physical proximity doesn't matter anymore. Schedules don't matter anymore to some extent. We don't need to make sure that, I'm doing reading at the same time Sarah's doing reading so that we can share kids. We can think about, today you're going to join Miss Scota's class and you're going to do the phonics lessons with her. And that can be up or down. So really thinking about who can we use. We're all in this together right now. Just want to push a few other differentiation resources your way. So remember, Sarah and Alana, big shout out to them. They continue to push lots of great videos onto our Big Shoulders Fund Literacy YouTube page. So if you're thinking about, you have some students who may need additional help, kind of think about the videos that you might push out to that small group of kids that are on that literacy channel. On our Big Shoulders Fund Distance Learning website, shout out to Kristen for doing the bulk of work on this. There are a ton of great resources that we've talked about before but want to repeat. The choice boards, thinking about the stop and jots, thinking about the different ways that we can allow kids to choose how they want to respond and what level they want to respond, right? If we're really thinking about differentiating for kids, it's okay to send out maybe that primary choice board to our intermediate kids and just say, hey, I want you guys to work off of this choice board this week. One of the other kind of benefits of this is that, I'm not really seeing what Alana is doing in class right next to each other. So I might not even know if I have a different choice board than she does, or if I have a different assignment that she does. So thinking about who are those few kids that you really want to push out some of the different aligned resources to. And with that, we're going to kind of think about conferring, and I think Stacy is going to take this part over. So Stacy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Liz. Yeah, so if you've used conferring in your classroom, you know that it can be a really powerful tool for giving really effective feedback. And since we are not in our classrooms, it's hard to replicate that in the distance learning environment. The Archdiocese has kind of suggested that we not do one-on-one Zoom calls with, one teacher and one student, just for safety reasons and liability and stuff. So we have to think about, well, how can we replicate that conference experience maybe when we're not in the same place at the same time. So let's start by just thinking about what is a conference. So we're going to start by looking at student work and figuring out what do they know and what do we still need to teach them. We're going to give them some kind of compliment, right? Here's what you're doing really well, and then here's something that you still need to work on. And then we want to teach them how to do that thing that they need to work on, and if possible, leave them some kind of tool. And so luckily, the internet has lots of tools that we can use to give those conference pieces asynchronously, meaning, right, when I'm giving the feedback to a student might not be the same moment that the student is receiving it, right? Maybe I record something ahead of time and the student is reading it or listening to it or viewing it later when they have a chance. So a couple ways to do this. So full disclosure, I haven't used Seesaw. But my understanding is you can record video and post video on Seesaw. And I think you can also record and post audio feedback. Is that correct? My Seesaw people? Yeah. Okay. So if you are usually, if you typically in a reading conference would have a student read aloud so that you can hear their fluency, and then you would give them feedback on their fluency, you could have them for an assignment, read a couple pages of your book, record a video of it, put it on Seesaw or Flipgrid if maybe they're a little bit older, and then you can give them the same feedback you would give them in person by just recording an audio file or recording a video of yourself doing that. Flipgrid is a really great resource for this. I like it because there's no uploading or downloading of any videos. It's just all right there in the app. You just press the button and then you record. So students can talk about their thinking and what they're reading, and then you can listen to that and ask them questions to push them further, and that conversation can go back and forth via video. Another way that you could do this is if you're already using Screencastify or Loom or some other platform to record mini lessons and then post those for your students, you can use that exact same platform to create a feedback video for a specific student. So let's say they've done a piece of writing, and you can pull that up on your screen, and then you're using Loom or Screencastify to record your screen and then just like your little face in the corner. And you can, point, with your mouse, just point to the different parts on the page that maybe they need to work on or that they did really well, and you can kind of narrate some feedback on that video and then send them a link. Other options, if your students are using G Suite, so Google Docs, Google Slides, any other Google products, there's built-in commenting features, so you can just type a comment to a student, and then what's nice about that is they can reply to that comment, and you can have kind of a conversation going in writing. So they can ask you questions about what did you mean by, add a comma, or, whatever the feedback is. And then you can kind of clarify and answer there. There are also lots of Chrome extensions and Google add-ons that you can use to record audio. So I was playing around with one this morning. It's called Mote, M-O-T-E. It's a Chrome extension. It's free. And it allows you, if you're adding a comment to a Google Doc, you can record 60 seconds of audio. So Liz, is it possible to minimize the slide so that they can see the comment? Is that okay?
Yes, sure. Absolutely.
So I was just playing around with this before.
Oops. Sorry.
And so when you make a comment, I don't know if you can see the link there, but that's the link to my voice comment. So if the student clicked on that link, they could hear me saying testing 1, 2, 3, or whatever feedback it is that I'm giving them.
Do you want us to hear it, Stacy?
I mean, it's up to you.
I want to hear it.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, Ilana wants to hear it. Hey guys, this is a test.
No.
Well, if you, Liz could hear it.
I had my headphones in and I quick pulled it out, and I think that maybe there's a connection, but
no problem. But you guys get the idea.
Yes, it was beautiful. As soon as Stacy sent it, I said, Stacy, voice comments, you're really getting techie on us. So it's great.
And does Mote have any limitations on Chromebooks? So I literally just discovered it this morning. It's a Chrome extension. So anyone that has Chrome, it's designed for Chrome. So it works great with Chromebooks. The only thing is, I know that when I was at St. Margaret, we could not install extensions on school computers without St. Ben's installing it for us. So we had to request permission from the admin to install or have them install an extension for us. So if you're using a PC, like your own personal computer, it should be fine. If you're using a school computer, you might have to submit a request to install an extension. But there's lots of other ones out there. So, Google around. The one thing to be careful about with extensions, especially if they're free, they might come, the people who created are getting something, for you subscribing. So whether there's, just do your research, make sure that there's some good reviews, and then install or uninstall it when you're done using it. But yeah, so there's lots of ways, even if we can't be right there with our students, to give them the same kind of feedback that we would give them if we were there.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. You introduced us to some new exciting additions that we may need to start using while we plan our literacy slides. Voice comments only, ladies. All right, so next up is Alana, who's going to talk about kind of these tier 3 kids that we know need the most help right now. So thinking about differentiation for our diverse learners. So take it away, Alana.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ilana with NQC Literacy. So when we think about our diverse learners, these are students who are already struggling in our regular classrooms without COVID-19. And so these are students who, no matter what, if they are not feeling confident in their academic abilities in the classroom, I can tell you that this is probably not helping. And I'm sure that all of you have students who are really having a hard time keeping their head above water right now and keeping up with schoolwork, or just understanding, or may not even be communicating with you at all right now. And I think when we think about these students, it's really important that the number one thing that we think about is their social emotional learning, and making sure that we are connecting with them and building our relationships with them, and making sure that there's a strong feeling of trust, of high expectations, right, but that are rooted in our love and caring for this child. Because I think a little can go a really long way in encouraging them to do to put some effort in, especially during these hard times. And so when thinking about these students who are Tier 3 students, I kind of made a little image here of things that can kind of be the bedrocks of what we're going to be pushing for. And one thing is making sure that our communication with families is really strong. This can mean, because right now, families are the number one supporter of our students throughout the whole day, and thinking about how can we support parents and caregivers and making sure that they are feeling enabled to help their child, know what tools are out there, know exactly what your expectations are, and maybe, going through with them how to get onto the website that you've created for them, or making sure that the parents know what those tools are, and making sure that you are in regular communication, especially with the families of your Tier 3 students. Another thing is thinking about that extra academic support that you're going to be providing. Because you were already providing them extra support in the classroom, and now you're going to have to do it again, but in a different way. And I'm sure, as I've talked with many teachers, I know that many of you are providing already some extra office hours just for certain students, and that has been really effective. Providing some someone also mentioned here already, like different choice boards, different expectations that you are sending to students. And as mentioned, because of the format of how we're learning right now, students may not even realize that the expectations for them are different than for other students. And another thing really thinking about is just going back to is that positivity, and making sure that, like, especially with parents as well, is like your communication with them is positive, so that when you do reach like a deficit, that you've already built in this trust, so that they are more motivated to continue working on that. And those are some things that we're going to be talking about, is thinking about a specific student or students that we want to build some supports for them, so that we can make sure that they're as successful as possible. And maybe also talking about some different tech tools out there. I know there's a few other ones like Grammarly and some others that might have some free trials right now that help students with disabilities, especially in reading and writing, being able to communicate more through those. So those are some things that if you join our breakout, we can think about a specific plan for students that you're just like, oh man, I really need to reach the student. They're really struggling. And I'd really like to put some extra focus on them right now.
And what do you do then with students whose parents, we have a student in 3rd grade whose parent has a very, very serious illness. And he's not doing much.
Yeah.
Would it help him to pair with another child or with another mom?
Yeah, I think, that's a really they're dealing with a lot right now. So I think, again, going to that social emotional support being like the number one thing that you're focusing on, and making sure that you are connecting with that child as much as possible. And the idea of partnering with a student is a great idea, right? Like making sure there's other people checking in with them, another parent, like you said, if they have a relationship. I think that's a wonderful idea, as seeing how many different ways that you can support that child even in this situation. I see Ray mentioned awesome snap and read. That's something I was going to mention in a breakout group. Awesome, Ray. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
I
great.
used that when I was doing special ed, and it was amazing. Yeah, it's really cool.
It is free. I wasn't sure if it was. I thought it might not be.
It might not be now. That was 2 years ago that I used it.
Well, I
But
think
it was
it's
2